Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
Picture this. It's Friday night. You're scrolling through your phone, and there it is. A photo of 6 women in a candlelit restaurant, arms wrapped around each other, champagne glasses raised, the caption reading, "My whole heart in one photo," and something in your chest tightens. Just a little. A small, private ache you'd never admit out loud. Because the world has been whispering the same lie to us since we were children. That a full calendar means a full life. That the woman surrounded by people is the woman who has made it. That connection, in bulk, is the truest measure of a life well lived. So now look at your own Friday night. Maybe you're curled up under a blanket with tea going cold beside you. Maybe your phone hasn't buzzed since yesterday morning, and honestly, some quiet part of you feels relieved about that. Maybe the very idea of replying to a group text drains you before you've even typed a word. And if you ever say it out loud, I don't really have a friend group. I don't really have a best friend. Watch what happens to people's faces. That flicker of pity, that flicker of suspicion. As if you just confessed to a wound. As if something in you must be broken, lonely, antisocial, sad. But what if I told you that's not the truth at all? What if I told you that neuroscience is now proving something extraordinary? That the brains of people who prefer solitude aren't damaged or deficient. They're specialized. Built to process the world at a depth most people never touch. Stay with me today, because by the time this video ends, you won't just accept your quiet life. You might actually feel a quiet compassion for everyone out there who's exhausting themselves, chasing a crowd that was never going to fill them up anyway. Let's begin. WHY solitude hurts before IT heals. Let's be fair to that ache in your chest first, because it's real, and it deserves an explanation before we reframe it. To understand it, we have to travel back, not years, not decades, nearly 200,000 years, to the earliest chapters of Homo sapiens. That's when the architecture of the brain you're using right now was first being built. Here's what you have to remember. Biologically, human beings are astonishingly fragile. No claws, no fangs, no fur thick enough to survive a cold night, no speed to outrun a predator. On the ancient savannah, a person who wandered off from the group alone wasn't being independent. They were signing their own death certificate. The tribe was the only real technology our ancestors had. Someone kept watch while you slept. Someone shared meat when you had none. And being cast out of the group wasn't just heartbreaking, it was fatal. So the brain did something remarkable. It built an alarm system, wired directly into our sense of safety, that treats social exclusion as an emergency. Here's the proof. Modern brain imaging has found that when a person is socially rejected or left out, the exact same region of the brain lights up as when they suffer actual physical injury, a broken bone, a burned hand. To your ancient brain, heartbreak and injury are read as the same signal. That's why isolation floods your body with stress hormones. Your nervous system starts pacing back and forth, whispering, "Danger, danger. Who is protecting you? Why are you alone?" And that's why so many people can't sleep on the nights they feel most disconnected. Meanwhile, the moment you're folded into a group, your brain releases a wash of calming chemicals. Your heart rate slows. Your shoulders drop. This is why nearly 9 out of 10 people gravitate so hard toward belonging. It was never really about fun. It was always about biological survival. So when the world sees you eating lunch alone, walking through a museum by yourself, going to the cinema solo, and looking completely at peace with it, some primal, ancient part of their brain panics on your behalf. Why isn't he afraid? Why doesn't she need the herd? But here's where the story turns. Evolution never builds one single template for a species. It builds variation, exceptions, outliers who serve a different function. And maybe, just maybe, you are one of them. The he, chemistry OF, TWO, different peoply. So here's different peoply. So here's the real question. Why do some people spiral into anxiety the moment they're left alone, while you finally exhale the second the door closes and the apartment goes quiet? The answer isn't personality. It's chemistry. There's a quiet rivalry happening inside the human brain between 2 very different reward systems, dopamine and acetylcholine. Stay with me, because this is the part that will make everything click. People who thrive on parties, group chats, big social circles. They're usually running on a dopamine-driven system. Dopamine is the chemical of external stimulation. New faces, loud music, fresh gossip, the electric buzz of a packed room. All of it lights up their dopamine circuitry like a slot machine. For them, a crowd is a charging station. But you might be wired differently. Some brains are more sensitive to dopamine, not less, which sounds like it should be a good thing until you realize what it actually means. A loud, high-stimulation environment doesn't reward a sensitive system. It floods it, overloads it, which is why, after a night out, you don't feel recharged. You feel wrecked. Like you need 2 days behind a locked door just to feel like yourself again. That's not weakness. That's a nervous system doing exactly what an overstimulated nervous system does. Instead, your brain runs on a smoother, quieter fuel, acetylcholine. Where dopamine reaches outward for excitement, acetylcholine reaches inward for depth. It's the chemical behind deep focus, reflection, and the specific, satisfying stillness of being fully alone with your own mind. When you're sitting with a book or standing at your kitchen window watching rain slide down the glass, you are not depressed. You are not missing out. You are bathing your brain in a form of pleasure the party crowd rarely gets to taste, the pleasure of total, undivided attention. You don't lack joy. You're simply running on premium fuel that burns clean, slow, and long, instead of the fast, flashy fuel that burns out by midnight. DHE Hiddensko SOF belonging. Now let's talk numbers, because friendship, real friendship, the kind society insists you must collect like trading cards, is expensive. And I don't mean the price of the coffee or the birthday gift. I mean the cost in mental currency. Every relationship asks something of your memory, your emotional bandwidth, your energy. You have to remember anniversaries. Listen patiently while someone recounts, in full detail, the argument they had with their partner for the 4th time this month. Compliment things you don't actually care about. Smile at jokes that didn't land. But if you're someone who gravitates towards solitude, there's an additional fee most people never talk about, the performance tax. Be honest with yourself for a second. How many hours of your life have you spent nodding along to a story that bored you senseless? How many times have you forced a laugh, faked interest, performed fine when every cell in your body wanted to go home and lie down in silence? Most social interaction requires a mask, and wearing that mask, hour after hour, is exhausting in a way most people underestimate. So people who choose fewer friendships usually aren't antisocial. They're discerning investors. Somewhere in your subconscious, you've been asking, why am I spending 60% of my daily energy budget on people I barely know? And when the return doesn't justify the investment, you quietly stop making it. So where does that reclaimed energy actually go? Into deep, focused work, into a rich, textured inner life, into the 1 or 2 people who actually matter, instead of a scattered dozen who don't. You're not bad at relationships. You've simply refused to scatter your emotional capital like loose change on the sidewalk. You're investing it all into the one asset that will never abandon you, yourself. If this idea is landing for you right now, go ahead and drop a comment below with the words, "I am reclaiming my peace." Because one honest comment from someone who understands this means more to me than 1,000 passive views. DHE mirror, you no longer need. Let's talk about something sociologists call the looking glass self. The idea that most people build their identity based entirely on how others reflect it back to them. Want to feel funny? You need an audience to laugh. Want to feel valuable? You need the little heart icons stacking up under your photo. Without realizing it, most people turn themselves into puppets. Their happiness and their sadness controlled entirely by someone else's hands. But people who spend most of their time without a squad are forced to live differently. When there's no mirror to lean against, you're forced to stop looking outward and start looking inward. Think about the last time something painful happened and you had no one to immediately unload it onto. What did you do? You couldn't outsource the pain. You had to sit with it yourself, analyze it yourself, slowly, imperfectly, begin to heal it yourself. That process is not easy, but it forges something rare, real psychological armor, absolute autonomy. You don't need a group chat's approval before buying the dress you love. You don't need anyone to nod along before you trust your own judgment. Your self-worth is solid because it was never built on the shifting sand of public opinion. While everyone else lives in quiet fear of being excluded, of being the one left off the group photo, you are simply immune. Because how can you be left out of something when you were never trying to orbit it in the first place? You are the center of your own universe. That isn't loneliness. That is the deepest form of freedom most people will never taste. The honest question. But we're adults here, and I owe you honesty, not just a comforting story. So let's ask the harder question. Is this solitude something you chose? Or is it something you're hiding inside because you're afraid? For some of you watching, having no close friends isn't a philosophy of independence. It's a scar. Maybe you were the kid who sat alone at lunch while everyone else laughed together across the room. Maybe you once trusted someone completely, called them your best friend, only to be quietly betrayed by them later. After a wound like that, the brain writes a brutal little formula. People equal pain. And so you build a wall, not because you love the isolation behind it, but because you're terrified of what's waiting on the other side. You tell yourself, I don't need anyone. Because admitting you do need people feels like handing someone the exact weapon that hurt you last time. If you recognize yourself in that description, I want you to hear this clearly. That doesn't mean you're broken. It means you survived something. Your brain is simply doing its job, protecting you from being hurt again. But remember the goal here. Solitude should be a room where you rest and heal, not a locked cell where you disappear forever. Use this season to mend, not to vanish. The gift hiding inside sensitivity. Now let's flip a stereotype on its head. People often assume that those who withdraw from groups must be cold, detached, unfeeling. But here's nature's quiet plot twist. The people who retreat into solitude most often score highest on empathy, not lowest. Sounds backwards, doesn't it? If you're so attuned to other people's feelings, shouldn't you want to be around them constantly? Except you don't have the thick emotional armor most people walk around with. You're closer to an emotional sponge without a filter. Your internal radar runs at a far higher sensitivity than average. Someone nearby is sad, and you feel it settle into your own chest. Someone nearby is anxious, and your own heartbeat quickens in response. Now imagine placing that same finely tuned radar into a crowded rooftop party. 6 different conversations at once. Undertones of jealousy, insecurity, forced laughter, quiet resentment. For most people, that's just background noise. For you, it registers as a full sensory assault. You absorb all of it, without meaning to, without wanting to. And while everyone else drives home from the party feeling lighter, you drive home feeling like you just finished a shift you never signed up for. That's why you withdraw, not because you're cold. The opposite, because you feel too much, too precisely, too often. Staying away from constant socializing isn't arrogance. It's basic self-preservation for a nervous system that runs hot. The company you keep, and history. Let's close by looking at history's actual Hall of Fame. Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, Beethoven, Georgia O'Keeffe. Do you think any of them spent their most productive years worrying about being unfollowed or nervously refreshing their phone waiting for an invitation? They were, almost without exception, devoted loners. Because while most of the world chases fast food dopamine, a few likes, a few empty laughs, a party that's forgotten by Monday, solitary minds chase something slower and heavier. They chase legacy. When you're alone, your brain shifts into what neuroscientists call the default mode network. It sounds clinical, but this is where the actual magic happens. This is the exact state where your best ideas, your deepest insight, your most original thinking is allowed to surface. In a world engineered to keep you endlessly stimulated, boredom has nearly gone extinct. But boredom is sacred ground. It's the exact condition creativity needs to take root. If your hands are always scrolling and your ears are always full of other people's opinions, where exactly is the space for your own breakthrough idea to arrive? When you release yourself from unnecessary socializing, you don't lose anything. You reclaim thousands of hours of your one irreplaceable life. And in that silence, You meet the only person you'll spend your entire life with, yourself. There's an old saying that you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So what happens if you don't have 5 people? You don't get deluded. You stay entirely, undeniably your own. A limited edition with no duplicates in circulation. 8T difference beaten lonely and Dalen. So here's what all of this means for your actual life. If no one invites you out this weekend, stop translating that into a verdict on your worth. You are not playing a smaller game than everyone else. You're simply playing a different one entirely. While they're busy building a network, you're busy building a self that doesn't need external validation to stand upright. While they chase the noise, you're mining the depth found only in silence. While they collect acquaintances, you're constructing character that will outlast any group chat. There's an important difference between loneliness and solitude, and I want you to remember it. Loneliness is the ache of being unwanted. Solitude is the quiet pride of choosing to stand on your own. So the next time someone raises an eyebrow and asks why you're so quiet, why you don't go out more. You don't owe them an explanation, and you certainly don't owe them an apology. Just smile, because you already know the truth. You're not missing the party. You're building an empire in a world that's addicted to noise. If any part of this found its way to you today, tell me in the comments. I am reclaiming my peace. Because chances are, you're wired just a little differently than most people around you. And that difference isn't a flaw to fix. It's exactly where your power has been hiding all along. If this spoke to something in you, subscribe and stay. Because next time, we're going deeper into why the ones who feel the most are so often the ones the world understands the least. I'll see you there.